In the small, sleepy town of Glenwood, Illinois, stood the Morris House, a grand, late 19th century estate that had been vacant for years. Built in 1887, the house was once the pride of the Morris family, but after a series of tragic events and financial ruin, it fell into disrepair. Rumors about the house's dark history were passed down through generations, but no one truly knew what had happened inside those walls. In the summer of 2010, the property was purchased by the Thompson family. Eric, a historian, and his wife, Lisa, an artist, along with their teenage daughter, Emily. They were excited to restore the house to its former glory, enchanted by its intricate woodwork and stained glass windows. However, from the moment they stepped inside, an unsettling feeling took hold. It started with small things: lights flickering, doors creaking open by themselves, and an inexplicable chill in certain rooms. Emily, who had always been sensitive to her surroundings, was the first to notice something more peculiar. At night, she would see a dark shadow moving across the walls of her bedroom. It was as if someone or something was watching her. Lisa thought it was just the stress of moving and dismissed Emily's concerns, but Eric was intrigued by the house's history. As a historian, he began researching the Morris family and their tragic fate. He uncovered that the Morris house had once been the home of William Morris, a prosperous businessman who had mysteriously disappeared in 1912. His wife, Elizabeth, was left alone with their 2 children, and their lives fell into ruin. Elizabeth's life ended in a fire that consumed the house in 1918, leaving behind only ashes and unanswered questions. Eric's research led him to a local historian who mentioned a chilling detail. William Morris was last seen on the night of a violent storm, and it was said that he had a dark secret connected to the disappearance. The historian hinted that some believed the house was cursed, with William's restless spirit trapped inside. One night, during a particularly fierce storm, the Thompson family was awakened by loud banging noises coming from the attic. Eric, driven by his curiosity, decided to investigate. He climbed up into the dark, musty attic, flashlight in hand. The storm raged outside, and the wind howled through the eaves, creating an eerie soundtrack. As Eric reached the attic, he found it filled with old, forgotten furniture and dust-covered belongings. Suddenly, he felt a cold hand on his shoulder and turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the corner. The figure was tall and indistinct, but its presence was undeniably menacing. Eric's flashlight flickered and then went out. In the darkness, he heard a raspy voice whisper, "Help me find the truth." Terrified, Eric stumbled back downstairs, his mind racing. He told Lisa and Emily what he had seen. They decided to hold a seance, hoping to communicate with the spirit and uncover what had happened. On the following evening, they gathered in the living room with a local medium. The room grew colder as the medium began to speak to the spirit of William Morris. The medium channeled the spirit, revealing that William had been betrayed by a business partner who had stolen everything from him and framed him for a crime he didn't commit. The storm that night was a turning point, marking the beginning of his anguish and eventual disappearance. The medium guided the spirit to find peace and let go of his anger. As they concluded the seance, the temperature in the room returned to normal, and the oppressive feeling seemed to lift. The shadowy figure was no longer seen, and the disturbances ceased. Eric, Lisa, and Emily continued their restoration of the Morris house, but they always remembered the dark secret that lay beneath its elegant facade. The house, now a beautiful home, carried with it the story of a restless spirit seeking justice and peace. The Thompsons made sure to honor the history of the Morris family and kept the tale alive, as a reminder of the shadows that sometimes linger in old houses, waiting to be heard. As the Thompson family settled back into their routine, they hoped that the unsettling events were behind them. Yet, the tranquility was short-lived. A few weeks after the seance, Emily began to experience new and more disturbing phenomena. It started with the old grandfather clock in the hallway. It had been silent since the family's arrival, but one evening, Emily heard it strike midnight, its chimes echoing through the house with an unnervingly sharp clarity. When she went to investigate, she found the clock had stopped, the hands frozen at midnight. That night, She had a vivid dream of a figure standing at the end of her bed, cloaked in shadows. Lisa noticed Emily's growing anxiety and tried to comfort her, but the disturbances began to affect the entire family. Items began to disappear, only to reappear in strange places. They would hear whispers in the dark, indistinguishable and disorienting, and feel cold spots throughout the house. The once comforting home now seemed to harbor a persistent, unshakable tension. Eric's research into the Morris family continued, driven by a nagging sense that there was more to uncover. He visited the local archives and discovered an old, weathered ledger that had been overlooked. The ledger contained cryptic entries and names that seemed to hint at a hidden conspiracy. Among the names was that of an old business partner of William Morris, James Ellsworth. Eric was struck by the realization that James Ellsworth had vanished around the same time as William Morris. The ledger suggested that Ellsworth had been involved in a series of unethical dealings, possibly linked to the mysterious disappearance of Morris. One evening, while poring over the ledger in the study, Eric heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps upstairs. He went to check on Emily, who had been particularly frightened lately, and found her door slightly ajar. As he stepped into her room, he saw a shadow dart across the floor, disappearing into the closet. Heart racing, he opened the closet door but found nothing but old, dusty clothes. That night, Emily had another vivid dream, this time of a hidden room in the house, accessible only through a secret passage. In the dream, she saw the shadowy figure of William Morris, desperately trying to communicate something to her. The figure seemed to point toward the wall of the attic, where Eric had earlier seen the shadowy presence. The next morning, Emily told her parents about the dream. Eric decided it was time to explore the attic again, this time with a renewed sense of urgency. Armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, he ventured up to the attic. The storm that had once seemed so ominous had returned, with the wind howling as if it were trying to keep him from discovering the truth. As Eric searched the attic, he noticed an old, faded wallpaper behind a stack of crates. With some effort, he managed to peel it back, revealing a hidden door, a door that had been completely sealed off. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. The air was thick with dust and a lingering sense of foreboding as Eric descended the stairs. At the bottom, he found a small, hidden chamber, its walls lined with old documents and personal belongings that seemed untouched for decades. In the center of the room was a chest, covered in cobwebs and grime. Eric hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. He knew that whatever lay in that chest might hold the key to understanding the true nature of the house's haunting. With trembling hands, Eric slowly opened the chest, revealing a stack of old letters and a diary, one that looked strikingly similar to the diary Laura had found earlier. As he began to read the letters, he realized they were written by James Ellsworth, detailing a web of deceit, betrayal, and guilt. But before Eric could delve deeper into the contents, he felt a cold gust of wind and heard a familiar, mournful wail. The house seemed to come alive with an intense energy, as if reacting to the revelations in the hidden chamber. Just then, Lisa and Emily arrived at the attic door, calling out for Eric. They had sensed the sudden change in the house's atmosphere and were worried about him. As Eric prepared to share his findings, a loud, ominous bang echoed through the house, shaking the walls and causing dust to fall from the ceiling. The family looked at each other with a mixture of fear and determination. They knew they were on the brink of uncovering something crucial, but the house seemed to be fighting back, as if it didn't want its secrets revealed. And so, the Thompsons were faced with a choice: continue digging into the past and risk further disturbances, or leave the house's mysteries buried, hoping for a return to their once peaceful life. The shadows of the Morris house seemed to hold their breath, waiting for their next move. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The Thompsons huddled together in the attic, their nerves on edge as the house continued to groan and creak around them. The eerie wail that had filled the air seemed to be coming from the walls themselves, and the cold drafts grew more intense. Lisa and Emily glanced anxiously at Eric, who was still clutching the diary and letters. "Eric, what's happening?" Lisa asked, her voice barely audible over the noise. Eric took a deep breath. I think we're on the verge of discovering something important. These letters suggest that James Ellsworth was deeply involved in William Morris's disappearance, and he felt immense guilt. There might be more here that can explain why the house is still haunted. With a shaky hand, Eric continued reading the letters. The writings detailed a conspiracy involving not only financial deceit but also dark secrets about Morris's business dealings. Ellsworth's guilt was palpable. He had orchestrated Morris's downfall but had kept one final, damning secret hidden. Ellsworth mentions a hidden ledger, Eric said, his voice trembling. He talks about a place where he kept crucial documents related to the conspiracy. The family exchanged uneasy glances. The attic's oppressive atmosphere seemed to grow heavier. Emily shivered, clutching her mother's hand. Eric's flashlight flickered ominously as he scanned the hidden chamber. The letters mentioned a specific spot in the house where Ellsworth had hidden the ledger, somewhere beneath the floorboards in the library. Eric was certain that this was the next place to search. Leaving the attic, the Thompsons made their way down to the library on the main floor. The storm outside had intensified, rattling the windows and adding to the oppressive ambience. They worked in silence, Eric and Lisa carefully prying up floorboards while Emily watched with a mix of curiosity and fear. After what seemed like hours, Eric's crowbar finally revealed a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small, leather-bound book, dusty and worn. Eric carefully removed it and opened it to find it was indeed a ledger, filled with financial records and cryptic notes. The entries revealed more about the illegal dealings and the treacherous actions taken by Ellsworth. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the lights flickered wildly. The Thompsons could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the upper floors. Emily gasped. It's like someone is walking around upstairs. Eric's hands shook as he continued to study the ledger. The final entries were disturbing. They detailed a final, desperate attempt by Ellsworth to cover up his involvement by framing Morris and staging his disappearance. As he read, a chilling realization dawned on him. Ellsworth had hidden a final, incriminating piece of evidence somewhere in the house. The family knew they needed to find this last piece of evidence to put the spirit to rest. They returned to the attic, where Eric and Lisa began searching more fervently, while Emily stayed close by, her anxiety growing. The storm outside reached a crescendo, and the house seemed to be alive with noise and energy. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Amidst the chaos, Emily noticed a small, inconspicuous panel on the wall of the attic, partially hidden behind old crates. "Dad, look!" Emily called out, pointing to the panel. Eric and Lisa hurried over and carefully pried it open. Behind it was a small, hidden safe. The combination was unknown, but Eric noticed that there was a set of numbers scrawled on a piece of paper wedged between the wall and the safe. With bated breath, they entered the combination. The safe clicked open, revealing a collection of old documents, photographs, and an envelope marked "Final Evidence." Inside the envelope were photographs and detailed accounts proving Ellsworth's guilt. Evidence that could exonerate William Morris and shed light on the truth behind his disappearance. As Eric examined the documents, the atmosphere in the house grew more intense. The wailing returned, louder than ever, and the shadows seemed to coalesce into a tangible, almost malevolent force. It was as if the house itself was reacting to the exposure of its secrets. Emily's fear reached a peak, and she began to feel a presence, an overwhelming sadness that seemed to suffuse the room. She heard the whispering again, but this time it was clearer. The voice seemed to be pleading, not just for justice but for closure. The Thompsons knew they were close to ending the haunting, but the house was not making it easy. The storm continued its furious assault, and the shadows in the attic seemed to grow darker, more menacing. The family's hearts pounded as they prepared to confront the spirit one last time, hoping that revealing the truth would bring peace to the restless soul and finally lay the past to rest. They knew that whatever lay ahead could be their final confrontation with the dark legacy of the Morris house. With the safe's contents clutched tightly, the Thompsons felt the weight of their task pressing heavily on their shoulders. The house seemed to pulse with a growing intensity, as though the walls themselves were aware of the impending confrontation. Eric, Lisa, and Emily gathered in the library once more, the eerie silence broken only by the storm's fury outside. The family knew that revealing the truth would be their final step in putting the restless spirit of William Morris to rest. They decided to hold another seance, this time with the evidence they had uncovered. Lisa arranged the documents and photographs on the table. Eric carefully placed the envelope marked "Final Evidence" in front of the medium. The medium, a seasoned professional who had helped them before, began to set up the necessary items for the seance: candles, a circle of salt, and a recording device to capture any potential communications. As the seance began, the room grew colder. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the storm seemed to reach its peak. The medium closed her eyes and began to chant, her voice resonating with an unsettling calm. "William Morris," she called out, "we have uncovered the truth. We wish to offer you peace. Please, communicate with us." The candles flickered wildly, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. The temperature in the room dropped further, and the Thompsons could feel the presence of something intangible but deeply unsettling. The medium's voice grew more urgent as she continued to call out to the spirit. "William Morris, your name has been cleared. Your story is known. Please, let us help you find peace." As the medium spoke, the air seemed to thicken, and a low, mournful wail filled the room. The recording device captured the sound, a haunting melody of sorrow and anguish. The shadows on the walls began to coalesce, taking on a more distinct shape, a shadowy figure standing near the fireplace. Emily, who had been watching with wide eyes, felt a cold hand brush against her cheek. She shivered but stood her ground, determined to see this through. The figure seemed to be trying to communicate, its form wavering between the realms of the living and the dead. The medium's voice softened as she spoke directly to the spirit. "William, we have the evidence. We have uncovered everything. You do not need to linger in sorrow. Your name will be cleared, and the truth will be known." The shadowy figure seemed to react to the medium's words, its form becoming more defined. It moved toward the table where the documents were laid out, as if examining them. The wailing grew quieter, and a sense of heavy, lingering sadness filled the room. Eric stepped forward, holding out the documents and photographs. "William, we have found proof of your innocence and the truth about Ellsworth's betrayal. This evidence will ensure your story is heard." The figure moved closer, its presence almost palpable now. The room grew colder still, and the candles flickered as if reacting to the spirit's response. The medium guided the spirit to acknowledge the evidence, encouraging it to let go of its earthly ties. Suddenly, the shadow began to fade, its form becoming less distinct as it moved toward the corner of the room. The storm outside began to die down, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly. The wailing became a soft whisper, then faded entirely. The Thompsons watched in a mix of awe and relief as the figure dissipated. The air in the room seemed to lighten, and the cold drafts subsided. The house, which had felt so alive with the presence of the spirit, now seemed quieter and more serene. The medium concluded the seance with a final prayer for peace and closure. The family gathered their things, exhausted but hopeful. The storm outside had calmed to a gentle rain, and the house, now eerily silent, seemed to have returned to a state of uneasy calm. As the Thompsons prepared for bed, they reviewed the evidence one last time. The documents and photographs confirmed Ellsworth's guilt and Morris's innocence. Eric planned to take them to the local authorities and ensure that the true story was made public. That night, Emily slept more soundly than she had in weeks, feeling as though a heavy weight had been lifted. Lisa and Eric shared a quiet moment, relieved that they had faced the haunting and brought some measure of justice. But as the rain pattered softly against the windows and the house settled into its new quiet, an old floorboard in the attic creaked, a reminder that some shadows might never fully disappear. The Thompsons knew that while they had made progress, the echoes of the past lingered in the old walls of the Morris house. And so, the story of the Morris house remained a testament to the power of truth and the restless spirits that dwell in the hidden corners of history, waiting for their stories to be told.